Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today it's January 27th, 2021. It is the 14th day of the month of Shvat. Tomorrow we'll be celebrating the Rosh Hashanah of the New Year of the New Trees, the New Year of the Trees, and we will talk about that tomorrow. I also want to remind you that now is time to sign up for a new JLI course, which will be beginning on Tuesday, February 2nd. Journey of the Soul. I'm sure you don't want to miss it, so please make sure to go to our website, jewishally.com, and sign up for the new upcoming course. As we begin today we're going to talk about looking back into the Torah reading of this week's Torah reading, today's Torah reading as well, and one of the grandest episodes of all times, which is discussed in this week's Torah reading. After the Jewish people leave Egypt, the Jewish people are now heading towards the land of Israel, the promised land. On the way, they'll be receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. But as God tells the Jewish people as they leave the land of Egypt that they should stop by a place called Baal Tzifon, so Pharaoh should believe that the Jewish people are stuck. Because of this, Pharaoh will then chase the Jews. And eventually, as we read into the Torah reading, that the Jewish people crossed into the Red Sea at splits in 12 different canals, absolute dry land. And as the commentators explained, there was fruits and there were birds chirping and all the wonderful miracles that came with it. While behind them, as the last Jew stepped out of the sea and the last Egyptian stepped in the sea, the walls came crashing down and drowned all the Egyptians behind them. And as Moses promised the Jews, the way you'll see the Egyptians today, you'll never see them again. And that was the end of the superpower of the world of the time, the land of Egypt. Now, if we look into the story, as miraculous as it sounds and as beautiful as it may be, the question still asks a question. You know, there were many people that made it to Egypt before the Jews left Egypt. Abraham, Jacob, Joseph. There were 70 Jews that came to Egypt, the brothers, when they were accused of being spies. They went back and forth to Egypt numerous times. Never in the Torah is it recorded that they had to split a sea to get to Egypt. Never in the Torah is it recorded that they had to get a boat to go to Egypt. Why all of a sudden the Jews coming out of Egypt, all of a sudden have to split the sea into this grandiose miracle? Was God just showing off that he knows how to make miracles? What was the purpose of God splitting the sea that the Jewish people should go through the dry land and make it out on the other end, drowning the Egyptians in the sea? In fact, many of the biblical commentators, starting from the Ibn Ezra, says, I haven't seen a sea that is needed to be able to leave Egypt, to come across to the promised land. Why then did they cross the sea? Was only because that God wanted to drown the Egyptians in the sea. Technical, as it may seem. In fact, the question even becomes greater if we look at the Talmud, that the Jews actually came out on the same exact side that they went in. They made like a U-turn in the sea. Again, accentuating the point that the reason why the Jewish people did go into the sea was only to cause the Egyptians to drown. Was that the only way God was able to get rid of the Egyptians? Was there no other way? He could have made a pandemic, a plague, a sickness. He killed the firstborn. He could have killed the rest of them. Why the crossing of the sea? And why with such fanfare? What was the point of this entire miracle? The Jews could have been either miraculously, like they walked in the desert for 40 years, and they never had to go through a mountain. They never had to deal with snakes and scorpions. They never had to deal with the nature that exists in the desert because of the clouds of glory. If the clouds of glory were able to smoothen the mountains and the walk for them in the desert, I'm sure it could have been a hovercraft to go across the sea, even if they wanted to go to the sea. Why the splitting of the sea? The 12 different canals, the all different events that happened there. And this is not just an event of history that happened 3,300 years ago, but we actually say this every single day in our prayers. We remind ourselves of the story of the splitting of the sea and the exodus of Egypt every single day. Why? What's it pertinent to us today to know that the Jews crossed the sea and that was their method of transport? Of course, historically, when we celebrate Passover, it'll be nice to tell over. Great story, makes even a great movie. But what does it have to do to us? How in our lives, what are we splitting our seas? So there's a story told about Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest authors of the Talmud, the Mishnah, that in his time the Romans made a terrible decree that the Jews were not allowed to study Torah. Rabbi Akiva, in defiance of the Roman decree, went and opened up the study halls and stood and studied with all the Torah. There was a Roman fellow at the time. He was a Jew, became a Roman, a Greek, whatever it was at the time. His name was Pappus. And he comes to Rabbi Akiva and he says, why are you defying the decree of the Roman? Don't you know you're putting your life at risk? The Torah does not allow a person to put their life at risk. And Rabbi Akiva turns to him and says, let me tell you a story. There was once a fox who comes to the water and he tells the fish, you see the fishermen over there? They're putting out their nets to catch you. Why don't you come on dry land, stay with me, and I will protect you so the fishermen won't catch you? The fish look at the fox and say, Mr. Fox, you're supposed to be the most intelligent of all animals. Don't you know that our entire life is when we're in the water? Once we come on dry land, we will not be alive anymore. Rabbi Akiva turns to Pappus and says, the same is with the Jewish people. The Torah is our water. And the only way we can survive is if we study Torah. Without the Torah, we are on dry land. There's nothing there. Now let's take a look at the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva could have had many different examples, many different parables that he could have given. He didn't have to give a child's story. He could have said Torah is like oxygen. It's air. Without it, we can't breathe. But he decided to go into an elaborate story about telling the difference between dry land and water. By understanding the story of Rabbi Akiva, we can very well understand what happened by the splitting of the sea and what that means to us. What Rabbi Akiva was saying is look at the dry land and look at the water. Our sages tell us whatever's on dry land is in the water. But what's the difference? When it's in the water, it's dependent on the water. The water hovers over everything and covers it, and the water is all-encompassing. You can't separate the fish from the water, or else the fish dies. It's non-existent. Anything that's in the water needs to stay in the water to be able to survive, and to be able to live, and to be able to thrive. While on dry land, everything is independent. You can be here, you can be there, you can go in all different places to be independent. What Rabbi Akiva was saying is dry land breeds independence. Independence from one another, independence from God. Dry land breathes and shows and says, you know what? I don't need God. I'm being taken care of. Everything is great. I can walk wherever I want. I can do whatever I want. I'm an independent creature. Water symbolizes, or water tells us no. You need the water to survive. You need sustenance. You're not an independent creature. Even though, yes, your counterpart may be on dry land, but you as an individual need to stay in the water to survive. Rabbi Akiva was telling Pappus the Torah is water. The Torah shows us our dependence on God. The Torah tells us the Roman officer is not in charge of us. Yes, it may be life-threatening, but our dependence is on God. We are all encompassed by God. And the moment that I think I'm independent, that I go on dry land, I've lost the plot. I die. I don't survive. Because all of a sudden you say, God says, you're independent? God, go ahead, figure it out. Make it work. This is what happened with the splitting of the sea. When the Jews crossed the sea, it wasn't muddy. It wasn't murky. They were able to cross the sea on absolute dry land. Why? Because when the water stood up straight and the Jews walked through dry land, we now had dry land and water combined together. The fusion of independence and dependence brought us one. The concept of being an independent, loyal servant to Almighty God, subservience at its greatest level. If until the crossing of the sea, the Jews were taken out of Egypt, the crossing of the sea caused to take Egypt out of the Jews. Until the crossing of the sea, the Jews were petrified of Pharaoh. They were still worried, what's going to happen? Pharaoh was ingrained within their DNA of being slaves and enslaved to something other than God. Whether it was idolatry, whether it was materialism, they didn't have a sense of self, a sense of pride, a sense of willingness to be able to go step and make that plunge. Once the dry land and the sea mixed, showing the dependence on God and the independence of the individual was fused together, they've not had that oomph, that Jewish pride to be able to forge ahead and receive the Torah. The same is true in our life. We live a life at times copying the Joneses, looking what everybody else does. Instead of becoming independent people, we depend on everybody else's opinion of what the world stage has to say, and that's the way we make our decision. Comes the Torah and says, no, the Jewish people are not dependent on the worldview. The Jewish people are water, they're submerged in a life of Torah, of godliness, that's their dependence. But that same God who craves the dependence of the Jew also wants the independent Jew to use his own talents, his own qualities, his own tools, and to have the pride to forge ahead and split a sea. This is the splitting of the sea that every single one of us in our day-to-day life, that we pray to God every single day as we say the song as the Jews split the sea, that we as independent beings with our talents and qualities that God has given us, to be able to cross that sea, to realize the dependency that God has given us those qualities, and to be able to make a passageway, break through any type of obstacle, any type of barrier, and come to Mount Sinai, see the gift, and bring about the revelation of God in this world. That's why we're here. That's the tools God has given us, and he's waiting for us to accomplish it. So, my dear friends, we all have a sea to split. The sea to split is bringing our independence and dependence, infusing it together, realizing the talents and God-given qualities, and making this world a better place. Wishing you the very best for a great day, and tomorrow we will discuss how we, the people, are like a tree, and why we celebrate the New Year of the Trees tomorrow on the 15th of Shvat. Have a great and blessed day.